Live from the KHOU11 studios, it's Great Day Houston. And now, here's your host, Deborah Duncan.
Great Day Houston. We're starting with a mature topic today, so if you have small children in the room, load up the Dora, Dora, Dora the Explorer DVD in the other room and come back and join us. We have several names for it: the birds and the bees, making whoopee, midnight cardio. I'm talking about sex. Many people have a tough time talking about it, and it's even tougher when you have to talk to your kids about it. Many parents don't want schools teaching sex ed. They'd rather talk to their kids themselves. Problem is that conversation does not happen soon enough or often enough. Okay, so out of curiosity for our audience members, how many of you, did your parents sit you down and tell you about the birds and the bees? Okay, several of you, but several of you were like going, no. Okay, when they did tell you about the birds and the bees, did you already know? How many of you already knew? Okay, yeah. Day late and dollar short. My parents were those parents who said, no, the school shouldn't do this, we should. Okay, they're 92 and 96 years old, and they've yet to tell me about it. Our next guests are here to help you negotiate that conversation with your tweens and teens, especially before they head out for spring break. It's time to ask the therapist. And joining us today is certified sex therapist Emily Diala and clinical director from Living Well Professional Counseling Service, Shanna Lewis. Please welcome them both to the show. Thank you for having us. And just want you to know, if you have specific questions about teens and sex for our therapists, you can call us right now. Our number is 713-284-1055, 713-284-1055, and our therapist will try to answer your questions in a bit. Okay, let's just start with a couple of things we have here. One is kind of our moral situation that we have. The other is the biological situation. You're not going to get away with, you know, from what we innately are. So teens and the teen body and mind.
It's true. It's really hard for teens because their bodies feel ready for one thing, but their little hearts and minds just aren't quite yet. And so that can create a lot of confusion for them. So it's important as parents to empathize with that. Say, I know it's difficult. I know your body is telling you one thing, but your heart and mind not be ready for that, and let's talk about it.
Yeah, back in the day when the lifespan was 25, you had to go ahead and have your kids by 10 and be done.
Right.
But yeah, not the case. So now's where we have kind of a collision of biology catching up with society, if you will. All right. The other thing that we need to look at and separate is, and I know you work with a lot of young ladies that deal with this, it's one thing to say, don't get pregnant, don't get pregnant. But we also have to combat girls who are thinking, I want to get pregnant, I want to get pregnant.
Exactly. A lot of times young girls, they have low self-esteem. They're looking maybe to a young man to be someone to validate them, and possibly having this baby could be, I would have him forever.
Yeah. And of course, we know how that oftentimes
really
works
happen.
out. Yeah,
it doesn't really happen.
There is a show that's on the air right now, Teen Moms, which on one hand, it's great because it really does give you a glimpse of what it's really like. They thought they were going to get the guy too, and right off into the sunset and raise our family. Not so much. And it shows some of that. I want to take a look at a soundbite from that show.
Everyone just get out! Leave me alone! Leave me alone!
All right, so Janelle has become quite famous, or should I say infamous. You know, she's gone into jail, come out of jail, the whole bit. Her mom's taking custody of her child. And so that shows a side where it is like, this is not a fun gig right here.
Absolutely.
But we also glamorize it because some of the other teen moms are on the cover of People magazine and all that stuff.
It's true, and I hope the kids are seeing the reality of the situation. But yes, for a lot of people, it's a self-esteem issue. It looks like, you know, they're getting a lot of cool attention, but the reality is that's not the case. And I think for parents especially, the key is to have those conversations early. And it is not a one-time conversation. These need to be ongoing dialogue. It's really important as parents to reduce any shame around sexuality because it is a natural part of being human. And so you want to take that away, get them young, and keep it ongoing. Create an environment where they feel like they can come to you with questions and also provide the information.
And first, you have to know how to have a conversation. Also, you have to combat what a child sees around them and what their culture in life has been.
Exactly. It makes it really really big difference, though, because these days children are getting that conversation with their peers, whether they're getting with their parents or not. And a lot of their peers are having sex, and they're talking about it. And so if parents are shy to have that conversation, and they're like, well, I don't want to talk about it, because if I talk about it, it's going to make them want to go do it. Yeah. You're late. Yeah. They've already talked about it. Right. And they may have already done it. Yeah. But you just don't know.
Well, how often have you worked with girls who go, well, my parents don't think I'm... Right.
Exactly. And you want to know, if your child is book smart, don't assume that they're also emotionally intelligent as well.
Yeah, I think especially a tween or a teen will certainly prove that they're not emotionally intelligent at some point in your life. All right. So we also know that when you're in love, like if you had married the first person you were ever in love with or ever had a crush on, would you still be married to that person today? Yeah, people are like, y'all are horrified. In the audience, they're like going, oh my God, no. But there is nothing you won't do for that person, so you think. A difference in the way that girls may perceive sex and boys perceive sex?
Absolutely. I think even hormonally, you know, that you hear the cuddle hormone oxytocin being released during a sexual experience, and that can be even more intense for women. So that's a very bonding hormone, where men don't experience that in quite the same way, and so for them it can be easier to emotionally detach, and so that's hard, you know, for guys and girls to understand that imbalance.
There's also this moment where we just want to get it over with. And spring break is one of those vulnerable times. How many times somebody will say to you, well, it's also the senior prom. It's like these monumental moments where things like that happen. And of course, if you have drinking involved, which when you're underage, there's a reason why you shouldn't do that, right? But drinking involved, that your guard is let down. So there's the social pressure of, you haven't done that.
Right, absolutely. And I think, you know, their brains just aren't fully developed yet. The prefrontal cortex, which is the part that's involved in decision making and planning, doesn't fully develop until about the age of 25. And so when you add to that drugs and alcohol and those barriers come down, they're already going to be taking risks, and now they're going to be taking more.
And the other issue we have too, of course, is, you know, there's rape and then there's date rape, which, you know, we defined later on, you know, not too distant past that we defined what date rape was. Again, there is that thing of that because you may be flirty or that you just open yourself up to it, and boys are kind of at a, you know, a disadvantage, the girls are at a disadvantage, and we have just seen where cases like this have really ended badly for both parties.
Very, very badly for them. I think there's a lot of research that speaks to how young this actually occurs. 1 in 5 young girls between the ages of 11 and 17 will be a victim of some kind of intimate partner violence, whether that's rape or assault, and so we think that's awfully young, but that's when it happens. And then, you know, between 18 and 24, half of them will have experienced that. So there's a lot of that needs to be talked about in our society, and I think it's not talked about enough to help educate these young girls and the young men.
And we still lay blame on, well, she was flirting with him.
It was her fault, and she did that, and there's never a reason, anything she can do that's going to make that okay.
Yeah, and of course the problem is that there are times when a girl has said, okay, I was mad. You know, so it just gets all right. So the safest thing is to just not do it at all. All right. We have, is it Kim or Tim on the phone? Kim?
It's Kim.
Good morning, Kim. What's your question for our therapist?
Well, what I have is a grandson who's 14 years old, and I'm an alcohol and drug counselor, okay? But when you have a 14-year-old, I was taking him to school this morning, and I said, you know, you're 14. You've got 4 or 5 more years as a teenager. We waited for this to happen. And I said, you know, and now you're going to be able to start dating. Well, what do you know about sex? And he goes, oh, Grandma, man, I don't even like to talk about it. And I'm like, well, you got to know, you know, that after we watched this show last night on television, it was a good show. It was about this young girl who was 13 who got pregnant. And it was like, it made me start thinking. And that's when I brought it up. He goes, I know. He says, I don't know, Grandma. He said, if it happens, it will. And I said, but you have to be prepared. I'm not saying don't have it. I'm saying you need to think about how to handle this situation.
You know, I got to say to you, kudos, first of all, this is just my opinion. You're not encouraging him to have sex, but just be prepared. Just be prepared. And I think that's that conversation. And at the same time he says he doesn't want to talk about it, you're talking about it.
Oh, yeah. He's listening to everything you're saying, and that's why I don't think the conversation can be abstinence only, because at the end of the day, you know, teens make mistakes, and they're going to get into these situations. So it's really important for them to have the information, you know, teach them about safer sex practices, practices, show them how to use a condom,
Yeah.
teach both the boys and the girls how to do that.
And
Talk
if you
to them.
don't feel comfortable with it, I remember doing a radio show once, and a guy called in and said, look, he goes, Planned Parenthood, you know, he goes, that was not one of the things that I wanted to deal with, but he went down and took a class with his daughter. And he said the interesting thing is he found out things about the human body that he had no idea. I'm going to tell you right now, most women have no idea that there's really one day out of the month that you can get pregnant.
Right.
Just one. I mean, and so if you just even have that kind of information,
Right.
you know, but it's amazing if you, what you can learn. But having that third party, whether it's the OBGYN, whether it's
Right.
the you know, somebody to talk to your child, because I know it can be uncomfortable.
Sure, it's good to have a facilitator.
Yeah, I was going to say, sometimes it's easier to have it in a neutral environment. You're not at home where all the emotions are very high in the counselor's office.
Yeah.
We become mediators in a sense, but also teaching as far as helping parents to hear.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest mistakes parents have. They don't listen enough to their teenagers and hear what they actually are saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
Or we
very
feel like we're
important.
bad if we say be prepared. We feel like that's like
Right.
no, it's absolutely not,
Right.
honey.
Right.
The day you get married
Right.
is the day
Right.
you will do this. Do you
Right.
understand?
Right.
Never mind that our wedding anniversary is kind of off from how old you are. But, yeah, do as I
Right.
say, not as I
That's
do.
right. Exactly.
Well, today on
Exactly.
Facebook we mentioned that many parents want to be the ones to tell their kids about sex. But how often does that really happen? So what we want to know, how did you find out? Was it mom and dad, school, older sibling, or a friend? Also, given the teenage pregnancy rate, Texas is near the top. America leads the industrialized nations. What can we do better as educators and parents? Is it about boosting self-esteem, more about morals, or is it about the mechanics, knowing how to not get pregnant? Log on and let us know what you think. We'll share some of your comments later in the show. I was talking to our hairstylist in the green room this morning, and he said he found out because his mom bought a book, Everything You Want to Know About Sex But We're Afraid to Ask. And he said he sneaked in there and he got the book and started reading it. Later years, he said, Mom, I have to admit, I was reading that book. She said, I bought it knowing that you would. All right. If you have some parenting issues or need advice in the romance department for yourself even, you can also call us at 713-284-1055, 713-284-1055, and we'll try to answer your questions when we come back.